Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to watch this video. Alright there guys, and welcome back to another video. Today we've got our first movie video of the year. And it's of a movie that didn't come out this year. No, instead we're talking about a movie that came out last year let's talk about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. That's right, I've finally gotten around to seeing it, as I never got the chance to see it when it was in the cinema in, July of last year, because it was only on for 4 days and there was never a good time to go for me and the people I wanted to go with, so had to wait another half a year, well, longer than half a year to finally see it, but now I have. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it. The movie begins on a Russian submarine where we see this key that is 2 keys in one that you put together that then open up a lock to something that looked very important. The people on the Russian submarine spot not another submarine 15,000 meters away from them. And in the blink of an eye, it goes from 15,000 meters to 10,000 meters. And then from 10 to 4,000 meters. It also starts firing torpedoes. So the Russian submarine responds by firing torpedoes of its own. Only when the torpedo that was fired at them gets to the submarine, it disappears. Not that it missed them, it disappears like it was never shot in the first place. So, after they didn't get blown up by the missile, torpedo, they then look at the torpedo they fired at the opposing vessel that's now 4,000 meters away. They look on the screen, and just as the torpedo is about to hit the opposing submarine, it disappears. Like it was never there in the first place, because it wasn't there. There was no submarine. There was no torpedo that got shot. So the captain of the submarine tells everyone to shut down the missiles, which they can do with a little red button. So one of the crew members presses the button, and nothing happens. Yes, the missile they fired is homing, but the only submarine it could home in on is their own. And that's exactly what happens. The torpedo turns around and starts coming straight towards the submarine that fired it. And no matter how many times any of the crew members press that red button to destroy the torpedo, doesn't work. And the torpedo smashes straight into the very ship that fired it, and all of the crew members start floating towards the surface of the Arctic Ocean that they are in. Which, of course, had one part of the key. Had the key that opened up the very important-looking machinery that becomes a very important part of the movie. Then we have a guy, and we end up in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, where this guy walks into a building and says food delivery, but no one's there. So he walks further in, and who from the shadows appears? Just only Mr. Ethan Hunt himself, and tells the guy some security questions and to make sure the guy knows everything that he needs to. And it's not a food delivery, of course. Ethan opens it up, and it's his commanding officer, Eugene Kittredge, obviously played by someone completely different from who the commanding officer of the previous few movies were, because after the whole Alex Baldwin shooting fiasco, there's no way he was going to be in this movie. So they needed someone else. And Kittredge tells Ethan about the very key from the submarine and how it is great importance to him and the team. He doesn't need to know Ethan doesn't need to know what it's for. He just has to go get it. And one of the pieces of this key just so happens to be in the possession of Ilsa Faust, who of course was in the previous two movies. She is once again played by Samantha Bond. Fun fact, she actually played Moneypenny in the Pierce Brosnan Bond movies. Don't know if I mentioned that in last year's Tomorrow Never Dies video, but if I didn't, there you go. So, he tells her that she is being tracked by a lot of bounty hunters as there's a $50 million bounty on her head. And he tells Ethan that the Arabian desert, somewhere near Yemen, is where the bounty hunters are heading. Find them, you'll probably find her. So Ethan makes his way over to the Arabian desert, somewhere just off the border of Yemen, as it says when they scene transition. And when I first saw this, I was thinking, what in the Uncharted 3 is this? Because it very much reminded me of Uncharted 3, you know, the final couple of chapters. Nate and Sully end up in a sandstorm, Ethan goes straight into a sandstorm. And just as the prediction from Kittredge went, that Ilsa just so happens to be there. But Ethan gets spotted by all the bounty hunters that are tracking her down, so he has to get away from them. He starts shooting them with a pistol and then an AK-47, and Ilsa, from a abandoned building, is sniping them with a silent sniper, and she doesn't miss a single shot. After killing all of the bounty hunters, Ethan walks over to Ilsa, who's lying on the ground, supposedly dead. She's not dead. It's very obvious she's alive. Come on, there's no way she was going to have been killed, because if she was, they'd have shown us her actually getting killed, but they didn't. So afterwards, Ethan ends up heading back to base. Of course, disguised as somebody else with the old face mask trick that Spy Family decided to copy. So Ethan listens in on Kittredge explaining to the even higher ups than him about the key and its grave importance that it controls an AI, simply called the entity that's gaining sentience, aka gaining a mind of its own. That's the one really dangerous thing about AI. If it becomes sentient, there's probably no stopping it. And the main commanding officer, I swear the actor playing him is the same guy that played Dr. Lawrence Gordon in Saw 1 and Saw 7. It sounds like him and it looks like him. I'm pretty sure it is him, but I can't be certain. So, after the explanation of the key and why it's of grave importance is done, Ethan knocks everyone out with a smoke bomb. But he'd already thought ahead and put on a gas mask and gave Kittredge one. Now, Kittredge thinks that Ilsa is dead, whereas Ethan knows she's not, because it then plays a scene where Ilsa gets up and is about to stab Ethan with a knife until he calls out to her, telling her that it's him. And then he tells her that she's dead, so you stay dead, because everyone thinks you're dead, so stay out of sight and don't be seen again. So after that explaining is done, they head to an airport in the UAE. which, if you don't know what that means, it means the United Arab Emirates. And Luther and Benji come along for the ride, our trusty members of IMF. And Ethan knows that the second half of the key is supposedly on somebody in the airport. And he's given these augmented reality glasses that basically a bit like, you know how the Apple Vision Pro that just came out a few weeks ago? It's kind of like that, only they're regular glasses like these. They're a lot smaller than the actual Apple Vision Pro, but it kind of works similar to it, so that's actually quite a nice comparison I can make to tell you how it basically works. So Ethan is following the guy that supposedly has the key, only for the key to have been pickpocketed from him by a woman. Ethan notices and starts tailing her, but a bunch of agents that are also looking for the key are also looking for Ethan, turn up at the airport as well. Benji notices a suspicious bag that happens to appear in the airport and then it disappears off the security cameras. But it does reappear later on, so Benji goes down to actually stop to see what it is. He takes it out of the bag and he realizes it's possibly a nuclear bomb. So Ethan has caught up to the woman, stole the key back from her, and put a cigarette lighter in her pocket. And he asks for her name, and she says that her name is Grace. Ethan tells her a little bit about what's going on, so the two of them head off to try and find the guy that she pickpocketed to put the key back in. Meanwhile, Benji is having to answer these riddles on a 5-minute timer on this nuclear bomb. A few of them, I'll list off a few of them. One of them is, are you afraid of death? It's not a riddle, it's just a question. He says no, and it comes up with a circle and a line through it, basically saying, nope, that's wrong. Because this nuclear bomb has letter combinations, and it has the name D-U-N-N, Dunn, which is Benji's last name, which I don't think we've ever known that before. I think this is the first time we've ever found out about that. So Benji just barely manages to sort everything out, but the agents start splitting up to find Ethan. And while Ethan's looking around, he sees a certain a reflection of someone in a mirror, but then that person disappears. Ethan takes the glasses off and he's not there. Ethan realizes that Grace has left with the key, so he's got to get to her as she's on her way to Rome. And unfortunately, Ethan doesn't quite manage to catch up with her. But he tells Luther and Benji that the mission is terminated. Get out of the airport now. So the mission has gone haywire and everyone has to leave where they are. Ethan ends up getting to Rome, and unfortunately for Grace, she gets taken into police custody by the Italian police. That she has a ton of different passports in her purse that all look like her, but are all passports of different countries. Ethan, of course, pretends to be her lawyer. Trying to help her. But she decides to run off, and Ethan chases her down. She gets into a police car, and Ethan gets onto a police bike and chases after her down the streets of Rome. And the agents that were following him in the airport are also here, chasing as well. But we've got a new person to add, this woman called Paris, who's driving this big truck. She's chasing down Ethan as well. So as they're going through the streets of Rome, Grace ends up crashing her car into another one. It ends up crashing her car. So Ethan smashes his bike into a couple of the people chasing after him, smashes another guy's head through the window of the police car, and then Ethan and Grace are cornered by some of the agents and the Italian police. The main guy of the agents throws Ethan some handcuffs, and basically Ethan puts one handcuff on him and one on Grace. Then while the police and the agents are shooting each other before Paris comes in and knocks some of the police officers out and kills the others, Ethan and Grace get the hell out of there, and they get into a BMW and set off. Driving is very awkward for them due to the fact that they each have an arm handcuffed to each other. But the high-speed car chase, this was a great scene. Once Ethan and Grace can't get the BMW out anymore, Ethan gets out his phone and checks for a safer car. They go to the location the car is at, and it's a yellow Fiat 500. Think of Luigi from Cars, but in real life. That car in real life, that's literally what this car is. But it's a lot faster than an actual Fiat 500. Ethan and Grace get in the car and get moving onto the streets of Rome once again, being chased by the agents, Paris, and the police. Due to Ethan's incredible driving skills, he just shimmies his way through everything until they get cornered again. So Ethan drives into this little alleyway that's the only place they can go, but they keep driving all the way through this tunnel, only to end up on train tracks. Grace gets herself out of the handcuffs after a paperclip she stole from one of the passports she was shown earlier. And she handcuffs Ethan to the steering wheel of the car as she runs off. Ethan then almost gets run over by a train, but he manages to jump out of the car just in time with the steering wheel still attached to the other handcuff. Ethan gets out of the subway tunnel, and then just so happens Luther and Benji turn up in a truck, well, in a van. Ethan gets in. Oh, and who happens to be there with them? It's only Ilsa. She happens to turn up as well. So Ethan now knows about this. The old man that Ethan saw through the augmented reality glasses that then disappeared, Ilsa says his name is Gabriel. And Ethan actually already knows who he is, because it shows us a flashback from 30 years ago, and if I'm to believe that every Mission Impossible movie is set the same year it releases, then 30 years ago would have been 1993, which is 3 years before the first movie came out, which means this is before Ethan was even an IMF agent in the first place, where it shows a much younger Gabriel shooting this woman called Maria, and basically Ethan got framed for it because when the police got there, he was the only one there at the scene with her. And he had two choices. One, spend the rest of his life in jail, or two, become an IMF agent. I mean, we know which one he picked. We're 7 movies deep into this, it's obvious which one he picked. So the gang make their way to Venice to a party organised by Gabriel. That he is, of course, there. Grace goes there. Ethan and Ilsa go there. And Alana from the previous movie, the arms dealer, she happens to be there as well. Nice to see an old face from the previous movie again. And there's a lot of explaining about what the key means to each of them, to everyone, and why they're so desperate to get it. And the fact that the only person that knows what the key actually unlocks is Gabriel. We, of course, know what the key unlocks because they literally showed us what it unlocks at the very beginning of the movie, but none of the other characters know that, apart from Gabriel. And Gabriel tells Ethan that the entity, this AI, it can think of every possible outcome, and it knows that one of the two women, either Ilsa or Grace, is going to die this very night. And after Ethan gets himself out of there, along as does Ilsa, Ilsa finds Gabriel and starts fighting him on a little bridge. Ethan is being directed by Benji where to go to find Gabriel and Grace, since Grace did have one of the keys, but she put the key in the pocket of Alana's right-hand man before taking it back. And while Ethan is being directed by Benji, the AI, the entity, takes over communications and starts telling Ethan where to go, mimicking Benji's voice. And Ethan doesn't figure it out at first. He still thinks Benji is talking to him, but he's not. It's the entity that's talking to him. So while Ethan's being misdirected where to go, he ends up finding Ilsa dead on that bridge. She has been killed by Gabriel. The entity's prediction that one of the two women out of Ilsa and Grace would die was correct. So after two previous movies with Ilsa, she finally bites the dust in this one. Ethan also has a bit of a fight with Paris, as I liked to call her the woman with the white face paint, because in the poster for this movie, that's what she's got. That's what she's got on. So everyone escapes, and Ethan finally finds Grace again, and they all rendezvous. And Ethan tells Grace that she should join them. She should become part of IMF. She's being given the choice that the other three had in the past. And Ethan explains the plan of how they're going to get both keys, which involves Grace disguising herself as Alana, as a replica mask of her face was made for Grace, but unfortunately the mask for her right-hand man Zola ends up, while that mask is being made, the mask creating the thing that creates the masks breaks down and overheats. So Ethan can't get on the train that way. He has to do it a different way. So onto the train they go. Grace disguises Alana, tasers the actual Alana, knocking her out, and to make sure that she doesn't find out what's going on. Zola doesn't suspect a thing, and Grace now has both of the keys. She also meets with Keatridge. She asks Keatridge to swear an oath of protection to Grace, protect her, and he says, protect her from who? And she says, everyone, including me. And the US and the sum of money that Kittredge's team are willing to pay is $100 million. That's a lot of money, isn't it? Meanwhile, Ethan is on a motorbike trying to get high enough to where he can just jump onto the train where it slows down. Unfortunately for that, the train isn't going to be slowing down because Gabriel has already knocked out the drivers and smashed the brake off, so there is no way to pull the brake for the train, and he's also put the train at full speed before smashing that lever off as well, so you can't slow the train down. Ethan ends up going all the way up a mountain on his bike before jumping off with his parachute. In a Guinness World Record video, it actually shows a construction of a massive ramp that the production team made on the top of this mountain in order for Ethan to be able to jump off it and commit and do the stunt. It was the biggest stunt jump in a movie ever, I think. And you know Tom Cruise. He, of course, did that stunt himself. He doesn't need a stunt double. He is his stunt double. Just as the agents make it onto the train and are about to start shooting, about to shoot Grace, Ethan crashes through the window of the train. Grace makes her way to the front of the train to try and stop it, and Ethan makes his way onto the roof to confront Gabriel. Ethan and Gabriel start fighting, and Ethan seems to be winning the fight, but of course, he's about to kill Gabriel, but he remembers that earlier Luther told him, Gabriel's the only one who knows what the key unlocks. We cannot kill him. And the entity is afraid of you finding him and not killing him, and making him tell you everything about the entity. The agent's also making on top of the train, and Gabriel actually jumps off more like just casually falls off the train into the back of a truck. Little does he know, Ethan had actually swapped out the key for the same lighter from right at the beginning. So Gabriel doesn't have the key and Ethan does. And the train section of this movie really reminded me of Uncharted 2, and I'm not the only person it reminded. I'm not the only person that was reminded of Uncharted 2 by the train scene, because you know those big signals with the red flashing lights in the 2 train levels of Uncharted 2, that if you get hit by them, it's instant death. Yeah, those things were in the Ethan and the agents had to dodge all of that. Gabriel ends up blowing up a bridge that the train is heading towards, and Ethan and Grace manage to unhook the front of the train to all the other carriages, so the train goes straight off the blown up bridge. And Ethan and Grace have to climb up each of the carriages to just barely get themselves up to the next one before the previous one plummets down to the bottom. But when it looks like they're not going to be able to make it, Paris turns up, who'd also been stabbed by Gabriel earlier on, pulls them up, and then it looks like she succumbs to her stab wound, but I'm not entirely sure if she's dead or not. They don't make it entirely clear whether she's died or not. The agents make their way back into the train to Ethan. He jumps out of the train with his parachute. And then we have a little monologue at the end of Kittredge telling Ethan what he needs to do as the camera goes through the Arctic Ocean and ends up on the very same submarine that we started the movie with. And that is how the movie ends. Overall, this was another great Mission Impossible movie. It was certainly worth the over 6 month wait I had to go through for this movie to finally be able to watch it. It's the longest Mission Impossible movie there's ever been, but it was a good one. I'd still say it's not quite my favourite. Mission Impossible 3 still remains my favourite. But that is going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you have, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and this video will self-destruct in 1 second.